Good morning and welcome to Train Shed Tuesday. Not a lot to talk about today, so probably be a fairly short little video. So this is my US layout. There's an update I've just done, previous video to this if you want to have a little look, but I've actually done a little bit more work since then. But I'll talk first about this. So this is an F unit, F7 I believe, made by Kato. So it's going to be quite a nice runner. At the moment it's a little hesitant. I don't think it's run for a while. Bought second hand of course, but it's a really important locomotive to me, because actually one of my first memories of anything actually as a small child is a book. Must have been a picture book, something like that, way back in the late 60s, and it had one of these on the front of it. I kind of specifically remember this shape and wonderful image it was. And over the years, it's one of those things that stuck in my head. So actually, when it comes to trains, this is my earliest train memory, which of course is an American locomotive. So the book, it must have been, I guess, on trains when I was very small. Had no real interest, but it's an image that stayed in my head. So when I got on to doing US railroads, obviously it became a bit of a hunt to see if I could get one of those. We'll let it run round a little bit. But it's a little bit noisy. It needs a little bit of a service. So really interesting when you look at the American diesels. They were brought in fact, in the late 40s and completely revolutionised American railroads. So they dieselled a good 10, 15 years before the UK. And of course, they slightly different locos, quite Deltic prototype from the front, but of course nothing at the back. And what they did is they added what were called, I believe, E's or B's, somebody will correct me, which were just power cars with no cab. And then you could put a cab on the end if you wanted. And I inquired somebody a few years ago, why even now did, a lot of American locos only have one cab? And of course it's because they've got these big Y's for changing, and they kept the turntables. So of course they could turn them. They had more space. We went the other way and decided to have a cab at each end, which was even the case with the 59 and then became the 66, based on a loco with only a cab at one end, and we put one at each end. But it's interesting that the Americans went diesel much earlier and therefore reaped the benefits. Our diesel program was late and it was rushed. And it's an interesting one. It's a very complex issue. Not if you're a steam enthusiast, it's really simple. Diesels are the big bad enemy. Everybody hates diesels. But of course they weren't. They were there to try and save the railways. And you also get people saying, well, the standard class of locomotives should have been kept in service until the late 70s because that was the life of them. And it's true. Some of the locos had a 6-year life, which was criminal. But what the problem was, people don't understand sometimes, is that they were horribly inefficient and expensive to run. They consumed huge amounts of coal and water, and the infrastructure that needed around that. 2 hard-working crew. You just imagine a tender on a big locomotive is literally just the fuel and the water, and it's not even all the water and fuel for a long run. Well, if you imagine that's 100 times what the space of a fuel tank is on a diesel locomotive. So straight away you're using a huge amount of your energy and power pulling your own fuel, which makes them horribly inefficient. And they were becoming a real maintenance nightmare compared to the diesels. The diesels had a bad reputation when they started because some of them were unreliable, but it didn't help that a lot of them were put in steam sheds full of soot and dust, which diesel engines didn't like. They then got the blame for being unreliable when it was the very steam locomotives actually that were making some of them unreliable. Not all of them, some of them were god awful. Because where the Americans gained is they had a few standard units, F classes, RS1s, 2s and 3s, that sort of thing. Whereas we went and produced, I don't know, class 1 to 27 or something, as what should have been prototypes and then been tested. And as we all know, they were rushed into service before they were ready, which we carried on doing right the way up to the class 60, which really was a shame, because if we'd taken a bit of time and got the class 60 right earlier, and the class 60 is still the strongest, biggest pulling locomotive we've got, but of course it was too late. 66s by then were taking over. Had we got them right quickly, then we would all be now moaning about the fact that every locomotive we see is a Class 60, not a 66 derivative. But we did what we always do, we rushed it. And we didn't get it right, which is really what happened. Not with all the diesels, because obviously the 37 was right pretty quickly. The 20 was right from the beginning. Things like the 31, they sorted quite quickly. Some of them they never sorted. But it's interesting that we were late to the diesel party. It might have saved some of the branch lines, it might not, because actually the early DMUs, not the rail cars, which weren't so good, the four-wheelers, but all the early DMUs were very successful. And in fact, some of them saw, I thought I was figure somewhere for something incredible like 200% increase in passenger numbers when they put a DMU on a certain line. It wasn't helped initially by having to have two crew, which means they didn't save the money they could have done. But even the lines where it did make a big difference, it was getting a bit late. Notwithstanding, of course, the fact that a lot of the lines were never going to make money anyway. And you then got into the argument of, well, should they have kept some of them for social reasons? And that's a whole different ballgame. But anyway, little digress onto American diesels. And then the next thing I've been putting a bit of thought into is exhibition layouts. So I went to a very good exhibition at Bexhill on Saturday. While I'm talking, that's become a little bit of a dumping area, my big layout, while I work on other projects. But it's better, something else for you to look at. So this layout potentially is going to be up for sale. If anybody's interested, probably best to DM me through Instagram. I'm not going to need that when this is built. And I can't see a use for it. So it would be better off making some space and bringing a little bit of income in to work on the other layouts. If anybody's interested, let me know. But it did get me thinking about exhibition layouts. I did shunt with the Japanese one. I'm not sure about shunting layouts. You can't talk and shunt. If like the Japanese one, there's a lot of interest in it because it's unusual. You need a lot of talking. I do like the idea of letting people have a go at shunting. But equally, I might exhibit for 4 days next year. I might just do 3 exhibitions. Sompting, Pevensey, and I've been invited to the Bluebell, which is very nice of them, to get back there again, which would be 2 days. But do I want to spend a lot of time building a layout and then storing it for 361 days a year for the 4 days I'm going to exhibit it? And I'm still very taken with this layout, which was the very simple one. So I'm still at a bit of a quandary really with layouts. Let me go this way a little bit. So the American one, this one could be quite a nice exhibition layout. It's not particularly big, but there's a lot to talk about. It's a classic train set model railway over with some sidings. It's first radius. It's only 3 foot by under 2 foot. So it's got the controls at the front, so I can stand at the front. I've switched to standing at the front from the back. It's much better. It's got the controls. I could still let people run trains using the speed control, and somebody, if they want, could actually do a bit of shunting at the front. So this is looking quite favourite, beyond the fact it's quite small. But then I was quite taken by Phil Gardner's sort of Austrian tram layout that's being extensively exhibited and was in Continental Modeler, which is also actually quite a small layout. So all that's in my head at the moment. Plus the fact I don't have a lot of time. The build is getting into the critical stage in the house where it's taking quite a lot of time now. I spent today building IKEA furniture, which is always interesting. Not quite as much fun as dealing with IKEA customer service when they get things wrong today, and couldn't help me. That was a bit frustrating. But I don't mind building IKEA units. So equally, I don't want a layout that's going to take a lot of time to not get used. I've still got the point down here where I've still got room for storing layouts, so my Japanese one's under there. And again, if anybody's interested in buying that, I've had a few people interested. Yeah, it is quite an expensive layout. It's 300 odd quid. There's well over 100 and something pounds worth of Kato track. There's well over 120 odd pounds worth of buildings. There's a £20 back scene on it. So yeah, I'm sorry, it's a relatively expensive layout. But if anybody's interested, again, DM me. So I've still got the option to store layouts, and this one will probably store underneath because I realised I can come a bit wider on the shelves. So that's possible. It's possible that could become the exhibition layout. A lot of it will depend how much time I get. We'd really like to get a few holidays in this year, which we haven't been able to do because of the build. I might not get a lot of time in the autumn. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But as always, it's, I like exhibiting, but I don't want to spend a lot of time doing a big layout. When I see some of the layouts which are exhibited extensively, i.e., I'm a bit bored with them because I've seen them at every exhibition I've been to. I've got no desire really to exhibit a layout 9-10 times. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see. The Bexhill show, by the way, guys, if anybody on here from Bexhill Model Railway Club, really, really good show. Really good show. I liked that in the Catholic school there. Quite a lot of traders, but I wonder now if that's not a bad thing. You know me, I don't like 50-50 shows, but there's so few model shops now. So perhaps we're getting a bit like the American system where you need to have lots of traders at your exhibitions because that's when people buy and sell stuff. There was some good guys there. I stupidly forgot to look for transfers for my locos while I was there, but I did buy a couple of things. I still think a couple of the second-hand people they're a bit pricey. Interesting to see that some of them weren't doing a lot of trade while I was there. Yeah, second-hand prices are interesting. I think they're on the way down again, or they should be. They're still a little high in some places, I think. Although, N-Gauge US is pretty cheap. I've just got 2 more locomotives I bought very cheaply. Diesels on the way. I've got a GP40 that I only paid £24 for. So there's still bargains out there, but certainly not if you want UK N-Gauge. It's all relative, isn't it? Somebody took me to task a little while ago because something was only 150 quid, which compared to the 200 and something which other things are means it's a bargain. Well, it depends on your version of a bargain. I like spending 40 or 50 pound on the loco. So it's all relative, isn't it? Anyway, I think that'll probably do for today. I've got some things I want to go and get on with in the limited time I have tonight between making IKEA units. But a little update, a little rant on some of the history, a little talk about exhibitions. Be interested to hear your views on all of that. I'll do an update on this layout probably next weekend because there's quite a bit of work being done. So this will be the layout that I'm probably making videos on for a while. It's not getting me a huge amount of views because it's not 00, it's N, and it's not British Steam. I still find that difficult. There are thousands of videos out there if you want British Steam. I'd like to think a big thank you to everybody that watches. I think we're getting there. I still think N-Gauge is the way to go. I'm not surprised that many of the shows I go to are 50% N-Gauge. Although somebody complained at the something show that it was 50% N-Gauge. I think the UK is going the way of Japan, where people don't have the room or the space, or to some degree the time and the money that's required to build a big layout. And I think it's mostly space and time followed by money. And I can see N getting bigger and bigger. Let's see if anybody supports that commercially. It's just 4 times as much space. Once you see, and I did this the other week, once you see how much too big 00 is, it's really quite difficult to unsee it. They are fabulous models. It is a wonderful scale for models. I'm not sure it's a great scale for running trains, but that's just my view. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.